Does God want a separation of church and state? Should Christians be voting biblical principles? Does it really matter who you vote for? Join Pastor Jerry Cook as he endeavors to answer these and many other questions over the next hour on Politics in the Pulpit. And now, Pastor Jerry Cook.
Good afternoon and welcome to Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. It is snowing here in Southern California, and we have been saying that now for the last week and a half, and I think most of us are about done with it, frankly. As I was talking to some acquaintances here at the radio station, we live in Southern California for a reason, and it's not necessarily for snow. But we have enjoyed seeing all the white stuff, even coming into the studio this afternoon down from Acton, where we're used to seeing snow, not as much as we've had recently, but saw some snow through Canyon Country and down into Newhall here to the radio station. So it has definitely been an interesting late winter for us here in Southern California. And of course, I just saw a news article yesterday, I believe it is, saying that much of the rainwater that we've had over the last several weeks has not been able to be captured. So we're talking about millions and millions and millions of gallons of water just racing back into the ocean, and unfortunately has not been caught. And so you just wonder where the money goes that we end up footing the bill for these particular bills and things of that nature that get put up every 2 to 4 years. And I think there's been several when it comes to rainwater, and still we have nothing to show for it here in Southern California. It is indeed sad, specifically with the amount of rain we've had and the snowfall. And the snowfall has been very beautiful. I mean, the mountains around me are as white can be. And they just looks like powdered sugar, and just very beautiful. And been watching Facebook today and seeing people post here in Santa Clarita of some of the snowfall that has happened, which, by the way, I was here in 2011 when I think it was Sunday, January 2nd of 2011. The reason why I know it was a Sunday because right after a church service, I had mentioned to some friends that I think it was cold enough to snow, and that Sunday afternoon we had the most snow I think we ever had here in Santa Clarita while I've been living here. I've been here since 2006, and I think we had about 3 inches of snow all the way from Canyon Country, where I used to live, all the way down to the Newhall Pass. And so that was 2011, and I know there's some folks that have lived here in Santa Clarita for 40, 50 years that remember when it snowed in the 1970s and in the 1980s, and they say that every once in a while we get it, but nevertheless, we've definitely been getting some snow, but I think most of us are, frankly, just about done with it today. Now, we have a pretty decent show for you on tap. We've got 2 attorneys calling in today. Lord willing, one of them will call in here momentarily. Great, wonderful. And Brad Dacus with Pacific Justice Institute will be joining us here in the next 30 seconds or so. And then during the second half hour, we'll be talking to Alexander Haberbush with Rex Institute here in Long Beach, California, and talking about various issues with Alexander Haberbush. But I believe that Brad is on the line with us this afternoon. Brad, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Brad, thank you very much for joining us today here on Politics in the Pulpit. I think this is your first time with us. If you were listening at all to the intros with our station here, you'll probably heard Joe Messina's voice because he does our intros and outros here for us here on the station. But Brad, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. It's great to be on your program. I appreciate having the opportunity.
Absolutely. Brad, tell folks what Pacific Justice Institute is all about and how they can locate you and how they might be able to help.
Oh, you bet. We at Pacific Justice Institute are about defending religious freedom, parental rights, the sanctity of human life. We do it all without charge. And we're unique. We're actually on a whole nationwide team of attorneys. We have 6 offices just in California alone. We have 28 offices in 22 states, coast to coast, who work together collaboratively which means we have very high quality, very strategic legal work and success. We have more cases filed defending faith, family, and freedom across the country than any other organization by far, bar none. And we do it all without charge. And people should never hesitate to contact us. We don't just cherry pick, a few little high-profile cases. We really actually are unique. We work hard to make sure that everyone gets help, that no one's left on the side of the road, and that's very, very important.
Oh, that's good. So the 6 offices you have here in California, is that the most offices you have in all the states?
Yeah, California keeps us busy. We have, 2 in Washington State, 2 in New York. By far.
And that's the reason why I'm giggling, because I kind of assumed that California would be the hot spot, and that's why you've got 6 branches of Pacific Justice here in California. So talking about California and the lunacy of our state, which of course both you and I are residents of this state, and as far as you and I know, unless the Lord tells us differently, we'll probably stay here. But anything in the state that Pacific Justice Institute is actively engaged in terms of the lunacy here against our churches or anything like that?
Oh, yes. We have a number of hot cases here on the West Coast. One of them is dealing with a church that has a preschool down in southern San Diego County, and they're excited about it. They got this wonderful preschool. Well, then the SWAT team, if you will, led by social workers, came in and raided the place, shut them down. It was initially because of the fact that some of the toddlers were not wearing masks, and some of the parents didn't want their toddler wearing masks, and the school is very respectful of what parents want.
Sure.
What they think is best for their child. In fact, we know medically speaking, it's in the toddler's best interest not to wear a mask, even amidst the COVID issue, because of the other medical and other developmental consequences. But in addition to that, they pronounced that this preschool was violating a state law that was passed about 3 years ago, which requires all preschools in no way to require any child to sing a religious song or to hear a religious story, like a Bible story. Even though this is a Christian preschool at a church, that was what has been alleged against them. So we have filed a lawsuit in federal court. Our chief counsel, Kevin Snyder, has done this. Moving forward, it's a very strong case, and we're very hopeful that we'll set some good case law on behalf of Christian preschools really across the country.
So did this FBI raid happen on this school in the last couple of years, or how long ago was that?
It was about it was last summer.
It was last summer.
Last summer. Yeah, so we've got the litigation going, and we're moving ahead with that, and that's a very important case. Another really big case we have is dealing with a teacher, Jessica Tabaya. She's was a gym instructor at a high school in Yorupa Valley in a school district in Riverside County. She was fired from her job, and the reason is because she was asked 3 questions. It's sort of like a tribunal came after her with, via the school district. They heard from someone that she expressed her Christian faith online on her own time, and they were concerned that she might be one of those conservative Christians, and so they asked her some questions. They had 3 questions. They said, first, are you willing to use a pronoun for a child? If a child says, hey, a boy says, I no longer think of myself as a boy, I see myself as a girl. I want you to call me a girl's name and she and her. She said, no, I would never do that. I would never affirm confusion on any child. I could never do something like that. I love children, which is what you're basically asking them to do, is affirm confusion. And studies show that actually now, the latest studies show that if they're left alone, more than 9 out of 10 by the time they reach 18 and graduate from high school won't have that confusion anymore, unless they've been affirmed in that confusion by the likes of public schools.
Sure.
So that's the first. She says, no, I can't do that. The second, they said, are you willing to lie to parents who may not be aware that their child sees themselves as transgender? Are you willing to cover for the child and not let the parents know and lie to the parents? She says, absolutely not. Parents have a right to know that.
Sure.
That's their children. God would want, I couldn't do that, in the eyes of God, that would be wrong. They said, okay, third question. Would you be willing to allow a teenage boy, biological boy, who allegedly has this confusion, identity confusion, to go into a girls' locker room when the girls are there at the same time, possibly changing naked into their swimsuits? Would you allow that to happen? She says, absolutely not. I will never allow a girl to be visually violated like that. That would be outrageous, but clear violation of my conscience. They said, okay, you're fired. Now, mind you, she didn't have a transgender student. There's none that are up and coming in the ranks. Could possibly never even happen. But just based on the hypothetical and based only on her beliefs of a hypothetical, she was fired.
Wow.
So we have filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. We at Pacific Justice Institute, and we've made the commitment to represent her as far and as long as we need to.
Talking about the lunacy of misgendering and gender dysphoria and all this stuff that's, obviously front and center here in California, you probably have heard of our district attorney here in Los Angeles County, Gascon, suspends a prosecutor for misgendering or dead naming a child molester. In fact, this district attorney actually suspended the prosecutor for allegedly referring to a convicted child molester and suspected murderer by his birth name as opposed to his corresponding pronoun, which of course he conveniently changed his identity when he was in prison, which I'm assuming is because he wanted to probably get some treatment, some better treatment, if you will. Did you hear about this at all?
Yeah, I did. Extremely disheartening. This Gaston has been infamous, if you will, for all kinds of dastardly things. This is just one of many. When he let an M13 be released after shooting a police officer, I wouldn't hold anything past this man. He's a terrible, terrible district attorney. He's against the people and protection of the people, and he's in favor of protecting criminals, and he's very, very, very twisted. So it's very disturbing where he's at, and there was an effort to get signatures to have him removed, and via the election and have him taken out, but supposedly there weren't enough valid signatures. So it's we're going to have to wait.
Over 100,000 were invalidated.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. It's politics, California. I feel like we're in a banana republic with tons of corruption, and it's most disappointing. But that's what we see here in California, and that's why we who want what's it's true and admirable we have to work all the harder. During election time and after election time.
The last time we had you, Brad, at our church was about a year ago, right around this time, if I'm not mistaken, March, April, May, and you were talking about the whole vaccine mandate situation and religious exemptions for folks at work and things of that nature, and we had that big Sunday evening service where we basically opened it up to the public and said, hey, come out and hear all this. Where do the vaccine mandates stand today, specifically today, where I think in California, much of the COVID restrictions have been, and the emergency injunction has been lifted in the state, and I think even in the county here to a degree. Where do those mandates stand now, and are those still something that we have to worry about going forward?
Well, right now, short term, we can be very optimistic how things stand now. The emergency order was lifted finally, even though everyone, had already lifted it themselves in their own minds, regarding this pandemic, if you will. But nonetheless, it was, and so people there's a lot of freedom there now. Mind you, individual store owners, hospitals can still require people to wear masks, for example. With regards to the vaccine mandates, we at Pacific Justice, unfortunately, we're still having to represent countless numbers, thousands and thousands across the country, especially in blue states like California, individuals who've lost their jobs and can't get their jobs back. Even if the policy's changed for an employer or for the government, so as people in the military we're representing, you don't have to be vaxxed anymore in the military. But if you lost your job because of that, your sincere religious convictions, too bad. We're, all the, over 80,000 qualified people, trained people to defend our country, men and women, have been booted out of the armed forces because of this, and are not being allowed back in. It's a travesty. Then we have those in the schools, as far as professors, teachers, firefighters. We have among our lawsuits, we have a class action lawsuit on behalf of over 1,000 employees in just one lawsuit against the city of San Francisco for firing them because of their religious convictions not to get the vax.
Wow.
And now we're at a point where it's not just about religious freedom and Title VII and accommodation. Now we're talking about mandates and requirements that are not supported by science or the studies or the stats at all.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that the vaccine does not prevent transmission at all. So if it doesn't prevent transmission, there's no valid interest for an employer to require an employee to be vaccinated. It's not going to prevent someone else from getting it, number one. Number two, we know people who've already had COVID, have a stronger immunity than those who've been vaxxed, even with boosters.
Yeah.
Number three, we know that it's actually much more dangerous than we thought. Countless numbers have dropped dead, and we've all seen it. Suddenly, an athlete, healthy athlete, dropping dead.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I was visiting my doctor, regular exam, and I was talking to them about the nurse and about a doctor that I met who's going to give up his job because they want him to get another booster, and he says, my heart, I've got this heart condition now, irregular heart condition. If I get another booster, it could kill me.
Yeah.
And she was holding back her tears. She goes, yeah, my son died shortly after getting the vax.
Yeah.
And it's just it's dangerous, much more dangerous. It doesn't prevent transmission, and it's no longer effective. It's actually counterproductive. According to British Medical Journal, those who are vaxxed also are more likely to have complications with COVID now. It's actually reversed even that one benefit that they're able to hold on to initially. So anyway, so these are elements that are strengthening our cases and our litigation as we move forward in our lawsuits all across the country. No organization in the country has as many lawsuits filed on this issue as we do at Pacific Justice Institute, and we're defending people of faith all over the country from being purged from their jobs and hopefully get their jobs back.
Very good. Yeah, talking to Brad Dacus here with Pacific Justice Institute. Brad, I want to ask you a quick question about an old news item. It's old in terms of the news cycle, but maybe not necessarily old when it comes to the fact that it's going to rear its ugly head again here very soon. But you remember a couple of months ago when the Respect for Marriage Act was passed by Republicans and Democrats. I'm just wondering what Brad Dacus's thoughts are. We've got 2 minutes here. What Brad Dacus's thoughts are on the Respect for Marriage Act, and if somewhere down the road this is going to bite churches in their behinds.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our legal team did thorough research on this because we want to make sure that what we report is accurate and correct. We don't want people to have false fears that they don't need to have. So, because initial language was extremely catastrophic to churches and religious freedom institutions. But our research discovered that basically this is more of a political posturing than anything. Under the present case law, unfortunate case law by the Supreme Court, this language in this gives no greater rights to same-sex marriage individuals than the decision from the Supreme Court. The only benefit it adds to the table is if for some reason the Supreme Court overturns the same-sex marriage precedent, then there'll be this federal statute keeping it into place. But even then, it's still limited to a great degree, still limited with regards to the states' rights and their decisions whether or not to conduct such marriage or marriage ceremonies in their states. So it really doesn't add anything in addition to effectively, practically, only unless the Supreme Court overturns the original same-sex marriage decision.
Very good.
That's the good news.
Brad, can we hold you over for about 5 minutes on the other side of the hour?
Oh, you bet. That'd be a
Okay.
pleasure.
We're talking to Brad Dacus here with Pacific Justice Institute. In just a little bit, we're also going to be joined on the line with Alexander Haberbush with Lex Rex Institute. You're listening to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we're back here live here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station, 98.1 FM and AM 1220. We've been talking to Brad Dacus with the Pacific Justice Institute. And Brad, we were just talking about the Respect for Marriage Act, and you basically said that the only way for this to really get upended by its roots is for the Supreme Court basically to invalidate same-sex marriage, which of course we probably know is not going to happen. On a quick note, just before we give you a quick plug here on for Pacific Justice Institute, what is your quick thoughts on what the Supreme Court's decision might be in regards to the whole college bailout thing for the students, student loan debt?
Yeah, well, there's three ways they could attack this. It's going to be hostile either way. They're going to rule against it, in my opinion. It's just which are the three? Is it going to be number one, a lack of well, it's going to be they failed the administrative process and didn't give proper opportunity for review and discussion on that, which is required. Are they just going to kick it back for lack of standing and then have it resurrect again? So, they're not going to rule against it. They're just going to basically postpone it in that regard. Or is it going to be, are they going to rule on the HERO Act, which is what the real meat of the issue is?
Sure.
Does this law give them the ability to just wipe out the debt? I think that's what they're going to rule on because it's for a number of reasons we'll get into, but I think that's what they're going to rule on. I think we're going to see probably a 6-3 vote declaring that they can't wipe out debt. It's one thing to modify, but modify does not mean eliminate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the core question, and I think the court is going to come down with this correctly.
I think the best way to probably eliminate debt is to do that one four-letter word, work.
Right. And
get a job.
Also, yeah, and the purpose of the law is to make sure that these students were not in a worse position because of the pandemic.
Sure.
Well, that's already been taken care of by saying you don't have to. We're going to freeze your debt until after the pandemic. Well, pandemic's over. They're not in a worse position. They've got their college degrees. They're actually even in a better position in that regard. So they've had time to work, and so I think I don't think Biden's going to prevail on this. I think it's going to be struck down. It's going to save taxpayers about $400 billion.
Wow, and that's not chump change.
Yeah, and that's it. And of course, it's a terrible injustice to those others who don't have a college education. They're not going to get this windfall if that was to be validated, and that would be just a greater disparity between those between the educated, college educated, and those who are not. So this is as a matter of policy, as a matter of proper statutory interpretation. This will be the right thing to do, and I'm confident the Supreme Court is going to rule that way. Sometimes I'm surprised, but I think we got the votes.
Well, amen from your mouth to God's ears, Lord willing. If folks want to support Pacific Justice Institute, or if they want to have Brad or somebody from the Institute to come and address their congregation or their group, how would they do that, Brad?
Oh, it's really easy, and we never charge for that either. So it's they just go to our website, pji.org, pji.org. And we'd love to come and speak to any group and share with any church. I do a lot of preaching myself, as you know, and
absolutely,
that's a real joy, as well as to share with groups about our cases and where we're headed as a nation.
Well, considering that there are a lot of pastor friends that listen here in California, I know that ministries like yourself are extremely important to us here. We're thankful for the 6 branches that we have here in California and the many more that are opening across the nation. Thank you, Brad, for what you do. Thank you for obeying the Lord in this call. And thank you for joining us today on Politics in the Pulpit, and hopefully you'll come on again, no matter what Joe Messina says about me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you.
You too. Take care. Take care, Jerry.
Thanks. It was great talking to Brad there with Pacific Justice Institute. We've had him many times at our church, and he's been a big blessing. And if you are interested in having him, again, just check out Pacific Justice Institute. We have another attorney on the line, and this is somebody who is loosely affiliated with Brad and Pacific Justice. And this is somebody who I've encouraged to come on at least every first show of the new month, and here it is, March 1st, 2023, and we have Alexander Haberbush with Lex Rex Institute in Long Beach, California. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me again, Jerry. I'm really happy to be here. I hope you're doing well, too.
We're doing fine. I don't know if you heard at the beginning of the show, but it's been snowing out here in Santa Clarita, so we're freezing.
Has it really? You know, they claim that it snowed down here in Los Angeles over the weekend, but I got up too late to see it, so I don't know if I believe it or not.
Well, believe it or not, I was on Facebook just before the show, and some friends in La Habra were posting pictures and saying that it was snowing there in La Habra, and that's, you know, essentially sea level right there. So, yeah, I mean, it's been snowing in some really odd places. I guess this global warming is really kicking in.
That's what I was going to say. Must be the global warming. What else could it be?
Exactly. Well, Alexander, I wanted to start off with something here that you probably are aware of. Obviously, you don't live in New York City. I don't live in New York City, but we have Mayor Eric Adams, who is the mayor of New York City. And you probably heard that he was at an annual interfaith breakfast hosted by the mayor of New York City. And he said some things at this interfaith breakfast that absolutely ired and irritated the left, which, of course, Mayor Eric Adams is a Democrat. And this is what he said. He said, quote, "I can't separate my belief because I'm an elected official." And then there was some scattered applause to this. And he went on to suggest, Mayor Eric Adams went on to suggest that his path to the mayoralty, becoming mayoral, was divinely ordained, saying that when he implements policies, he does so in a godlike approach, just quoting the mayor there. And then at another point, Mayor Adams said, seemed to suggest that it was a mistake for the Supreme Court to ban mandated prayer in public schools, as it did in 1962. And then I'm going to quote the mayor. He says, "When we took prayer out of schools, guns came into schools." What do you make of the mayor's statements here, which seem to be a little out of place for somebody who's on the left?
Well, you know, taken out of context, I think that you could expect to hear those sorts of comments from a constitutional conservative, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure what particular religion Mr. Adams subscribes to, but I think that his idea of the influence of religion in the political sphere, I think, would obviously probably be a bit different from yours and mine.
Sure.
But in terms of the overall thought, you know, I think he's spot on.
Yeah.
We can't expect people to separate their fundamental convictions about the way the world and life is from governance. Those things necessarily affect each other. And I don't think that's just true of opinions that agree with us. I think that's true of people that disagree with us as well. You know, I'm glad that he's honest enough to recognize it.
Yeah. You know what's really funny is this is a New York Times article, Alexander, and I kept reading down the article here, and it's interesting how the Times actually did some accidental journalism. It says, quote, "The phrase separation of church and state," and they have that in quotes, "is not in the Constitution." Now, first of all, we can applaud that, right?
I don't think they would ever give that to us if somebody on our side had made those comments.
Totally amazing, but they say the phrase,
right, though.
It doesn't appear. But then it says this, and I want to get your take on this from a legal perspective. It says, "But the First Amendment statement that, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof," they go on to say, "has been widely interpreted to dictate such separation." Is that a bit of a stretch on the Times there, or what say you, Alexander Haberbush?
Well, you know, I think that phrase has been widely interpreted to mean, I think that's a significant phrase there, Because if they're talking about the way that some people have twisted the words of the First Amendment to refer to a separation of church and state, they're right. That has absolutely happened. There's some really, really bad Supreme Court precedent, particularly from the middle of the 20th century, during the 1960s and 70s, largely under the Warren Court, where the First Amendment was taken to mean exactly that. That absolute separation of church and state, no ifs, ands, or buts. That was not at all what our founding fathers had in mind when they wrote it, and it's not what's enshrined in the text of the First Amendment. What it says is Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion. Well, students of history can tell you that establishment of religion refers to an established church, a church that's been put in place as sort of a national church. They got one of those over in England. It's called the Church of England. And King Charles is technically the head of the Church of England. We can't have that in the United States. We can never have a Church of America, and the president can never be the head of that national, state-established church. That's what the First Amendment prohibits, and it does it largely because at the time there actually were lots of established religions in the various and several states. So you can't have the federal government telling some of those states they're wrong and other of those states that they're right. I mean, that just makes no sense. So the First Amendment prohibits that. I think that particular clause of the Constitution has been read so broadly as to destroy its meaning entirely. But that's what it originally meant.
Mayor Adams was asked this, and Mayor Adams actually said something that I want to quote him here again. And again, this is odd for me because usually I'm quoting a Democrat in a negative light. But here I am quoting a Democrat in a positive
light. Fair
light.
to all sides.
I guess so, and I guess for our side we are fair. If somebody says something right, we're going to go ahead and acknowledge it. But Mayor Adams said this, because somebody had pushed back on him about what he said at this interfaith breakfast, and they said, what about separation of church and state, and so on and so forth. And then he went on to say a few things, and then he said this, quote, "The state is the body, the church is the heart. When you take the heart out of the body's dead." That's a great statement in many ways.
Yeah, I would say that it read in the correct light. I think that there's truth in that. It's the church and the state serve separate functions in our society. And I think those functions are supposed to complement each other. I think that you can take the body metaphor a little bit too far. I don't know if he's going there or not. But I think that if the essence of what he means by that is that they serve separate functions which are complementary, I think he's right.
And I think that's what the way I interpreted it, as two separate functions, but they're complementing each other, because obviously a heart needs to have a body needs to have a heart,
Of course.
Obviously the heart can live without the body, but it doesn't have any purpose or function without the body. So.
Right. I think calling the state the body might be a little bit much, because
Well, he is a Democrat. He is a Democrat, Alexander.
They're going to try to overstate the importance of the state.
There's no doubt about that.
The state maybe one body part among many, and then the church is another one. And I think the church sort of ought to be giving moral guidance to the others.
Sure. No, I completely agree.
I don't know. I don't know that I'd call the state the whole body.
Well, the last time you were on, Alexander, we were talking a little bit about the debacle with the classified documents that were both. Well, not both. They were with Vice President Pence, and then, of course, Donald Trump, and then Biden himself. So
everybody.
Exactly.
Who doesn't keep classified documents?
Exactly. So, really, in the last few days, weeks, if I'm not mistaken, that story has kind of been buried, and a bunch of other things have taken the lead. I'm just wondering what you think the outcome is ultimately going to be here, and if there will be any kind of repercussion on any one of these three, considering that two of these individuals had FBI raids,
right.
Even though technically...
Well, one was a raid, one was a sort of mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement, yeah. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are going forward on this, and if this will even see the light of day anymore.
It's hard to say. I think that last I heard on this, it was handed over to a congressional committee. And those congressional committees can go any different direction. They are very subject to the winds of political favor or disfavor. So, if this document scandal is made an issue of re-election for these politicians, I think absolutely you can expect them to do something about it. But if the media continues to bury the story, I don't know that they will.
Yeah.
So, it's like anything else, once Congress gets a hold of it, by nature it's now become a political issue, and it's subject to winds of passion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I just been scouring the news articles, and I just haven't seen anything on it in the last 4, 5, 6 days.
No.
And it's been, the weather has taken priority, and some other things as well. But anyway, real quickly, I wanted to also get your take here. We only have 2 minutes here for this segment, Alexander, but just a couple days ago, actually February 26th, a couple days ago, the Wall Street Journal came out with their assessment on this lab leak about the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the
finally figuring out what the rest of us figured out
3 years ago.
3 years ago at this point.
Exactly. So here we have the Energy Department that says, and I have to throw this in there, low confidence, obviously, but the Energy Department comes out and says, most likely the origin of the COVID-19 is from a laboratory in Wuhan. This, of course, was something that people were ridiculed for believing. They were, considered they were name-called, all kinds of things like that.
They told us it was disproven.
Exactly.
Because I think for the first few weeks, everybody was saying it was a lab leak.
Yeah.
And then it went to the point where, no, there's been new information that's been disproven. Well, that was a lie. There never was new information because, lo and behold, we come back years later, and now everyone's saying it again.
Yeah. And it's amazing that, all of the media in lockstep were basically decrying this as a theory. This was just this was a conspiracy theory. This was, and of course, because Trump was one of the ones that believed it, we had to squash this at all costs. Just real quickly before we come to the break here, Alexander, why do you think the left is so determined to make sure that this lab leak theory just remains just that, a theory?
Well, I think from the fact that we have multiple federal agencies now saying that it's likely true, I don't think their commitment ever actually was to keeping the lab leak theory as a theory. I think that we're probably going to see increasing confidence in the months and weeks that follow in the fact that this virus was leaked from a lab. I think the only reason the left really ever opposed this concept was because President Trump had suggested it.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you said. It's he could say the sky is blue, and I think that you'd find people on the left arguing that it's green. I think it's really that simple.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is just that simple, folks. Alexander, if folks want to learn more about Lex Rex Institute, how they locate you and how they find you and how they try to help you.
Yeah, so it's very similar to Pacific Justice. We represent people who have had their constitutional rights violated by their government. If you'd like a free consultation, you can visit our website. That's lexrex.org, LEXREX.org.
Well, folks, you get out there and you support Lex Rex, or get out there and notify other pastors about this organization. Thank you, Alexander, for coming on today. We're looking forward to having you back the first Wednesday of April. Will be the week before Easter, and we'll have a lot to talk about then, I'm sure. But thank you so much, Alexander, for coming on Politics in the Pulpit today.
All right, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on,
Thank
Jerry.
you, sir. You're listening to Hometown Station here on AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be back in just a minute.
My name is Kerry Quashin with Action Drug Rehabs. I'm here to share something that's true to my heart. Over the past year, we've lost over 30 young adults in Santa Clarita to accidental, or should I say, drug poisoning from the fentanyl crisis. One is too many. 30 is unacceptable. On March 13th, Action Drug Rehabs, KHTS, and Real Life Church is going to be holding a vigil in remembrance of their deaths. We're going to have families that are going to be able to share their thoughts of losing their loved ones. And that's March 13th at 7 p.m. at Real Life Church in Valencia.
It's like no other station I've ever listened to. It's great.
Your hometown station.
Politics and the Pulpit with Pastor Jerry Cook, your holy host. A show where we look at the world through the prism of the Word. We just had a great conversation with Alexander Haberbush with Lex Rex Institute, and before him with attorney Brad Dacus with Pacific Justice Institute. And we covered a whole series of issues. And one of the things I wanted to let you folks listen in on is just how biased our American media is here in the United States of America. And it's great that we actually have an alternative to the legacy media. But as I was talking with Alexander before the break, just a couple days ago, the Wall Street Journal came out with the Energy Department news that says that the pandemic most likely arose from a laboratory leak, according to a classified intelligence report recently provided to the White House and key members of Congress. And, of course, I have to stress that it says the Energy Department made its judgment with, quote, low confidence, according to the people who have read the classified report. And I'm sure the only reason why they put that in their intelligence report is so the left could throw that out and say, well, listen, it's low confidence. We shouldn't put too much energy into talking about this. But I'm pretty sure that they're coming to the conclusion that we all came to years ago. If you had a bunch of chocolate just flooding the streets outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania, I think most of us could probably come to the conclusion it might have come from the Hershey chocolate factory that's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Just a common sense consensus. But I want you to listen to this little video clip here. The first part of it is going to be what the Wall Street Journal just concluded here with the intelligence report that came out from the Energy Department. And then right after that, you're going to hear what the media was saying back in 2020 and 2021. Uh-oh. It didn't work. Well, let me tell you what was saying. The initial report was this, that the Energy Department and several other agencies within the Biden administration all came to the conclusion that the COVID leak happened because of a laboratory leak. And then for the next minute and 40 seconds, we heard from MSNBC, CNN, and a bunch of other channels essentially saying that people were either racist or they had some sort of nefarious agenda. They were calling out Tom Cotton and others, including President Trump, who, of course, was saying literally within a couple weeks of the pandemic coming on the scene back in March of 2020 that this was a lab leak. And so here we are, just a couple weeks ago, if you remember, they were talking about how natural resilience to the disease was already manifesting itself to be better than actually getting the vaccine. And all of a sudden now, here we are 3 years later, and ever so slowly, these news stories are starting to creep out. Now, to be fair, Dan Bongino, who I listen to pretty regularly because he is on Rush's time slot here in Southern California, he thinks that this is a bit of a diversionary tactic, that this is something that is kind of a shiny object to get our attention away from other items. All I can tell you is this. I don't know. It could be. Dan Bongino seems to have pretty decent instincts on these kinds of things. But the fact is, all I can tell you is that the Energy Department and these other organizations that have come alongside and finally acknowledged what we've all known for 3 years is good. I don't know what this is ever going to lead to. I don't know if there's ever going to be culpability for those organizations out there that suppress this. These are the same organizations that promoted the whole PP tape hoax with Russia and Donald Trump. This is the same organization that could look at a bill that is signed by Hunter Biden and says, well, the laptop is Russian disinformation. These are all the same people that said the same things, and now they have egg on their face, proverbially speaking, these 3 years later. And again, I don't think there's ever going to be any kind of redemption for those of us out there, other than just simply feeling good and sitting back on our own laurels on this. Let me give you a few shameless plugs. Next Wednesday, in studio, we are going to have pastor of Grace Baptist Church here in Santa Clarita. His name right now totally escapes me. Pastor Haig will be with us here on KHTS, and we'll be doing an entire hour with Pastor Haig from Grace Baptist Church. And so if you're listening from Grace Baptist Church off of Copper Hill, you're in Santa Clarita, your pastor will be in studio with us next week. And then our intention is to have Dr. Robert Malone, one of the frontline doctors from 2020, that was one of the first doctors to kind of warn folks about the vaccines and the efficacy of the masks and things of that nature. Of course, he was basically blacklisted by every organization out there. Our objective is to get him, I think, the last Wednesday of March, but I'll let you know as that schedule gets firmed up with Dr. Robert Malone. Let me also give you another shameless plug here. If you're looking for a good, solid church to attend, Freedom's Way Baptist Church is a church that I think you should attend. You say, why? Because I pastor that church. freedomswaybaptistchurch.com. You can check us out online. That's Freedoms with an S. We'll be celebrating our 21st anniversary on March 12th, just a couple weeks from now. And we'll have some guest speaker come in. Of course, we have Mayor Jason Gibbs, the Honorable Mayor, and of course, Congressman Garcia will also be there as one of our special guests as well. And so encourage you to come out. Also, if you're looking for a school that does not indoctrinate but educates, would encourage you to give Lighthouse Christian Academy a call. You can find them on our website as well. Just go up to the top of the line there on the website and check out Lighthouse Christian Academy. Click onto the button there and find out what you want about Lighthouse. And Christine Aragon is our contact there. And talk to her about all of your needs for education for your kids. Again, a school that educates but does not indoctrinate. And then I think Suzette Martinez will also, former state assemblywoman for our district here, will be joining us in a couple of weeks as well, and talking about her future in politics, which, according to what I've heard, is still going to be rosy. So Suzette will be joining us here in a couple weeks as well. And then one more shameless plug before we come off the air today. We're going to have a debate with somebody who claims atheism, which I think is always a lot of fun. And so we're going to have an atheist come on, and we're going to have a nice discussion back and forth between somebody who is theistic as opposed to somebody who is atheistic, and hopefully we can have a civil discussion during that 1 hour. Again, you're listening to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. I'm your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, saying thank you very much for listening today. If you're out there in the snow, drive safely. If you're at home and looking at the snow, stay warm, and we'll catch you next week. Lord bless you.